Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. We got welcome to the live stream, YouTube people. Thanks for coming. Make sure you type questions in the comment or the chat section, and I will see them and I will pass them on to Loralie. Loralie Cox is our presenter today. She got her bachelor's in horticulture from USU, her master's in horticulture education with emphasis in water efficient landscapes at USU. She is was the USU Extension Horticulture Agent in Cache County, the first one.
That's cool.
Department of Agriculture Resource Coordinator, managing large area projects to conserve natural resources in northern Utah, including water conservation, noxious weed control, soil health, and air quality. She is or was the president of the Utah Weed. Was years ago. Of the Utah Weed Control Association in 2022. And please give a warm welcome to Loralie Cox.
Cool. This is a small group, so I hope you'll all participate. Questions are always great, okay? So we're going to talk, as we said, about gardening. So we're going to look at vegetables today, okay? So just thinking, what do you need to grow good plants?
Good soil.
Soil.
Sun.
Sun.
Seed.
What?
Warmth.
Oh, heat, okay.
Water.
Water.
Oxygen.
And that's part of
Air.
the air. Anything else?
Protection from all the bugs.
Okay, that's part of it. I think space. We don't often think about that.
Okay.
But if you were to grow a garden, sunshine and warmth was said, you need at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunshine for a garden. Interesting enough, we need the air, but look how many of the elements that are required for growth come from the air and water. 96% of what plants need. And then we have soil, which include, from the soil, you get your macro and micronutrients. We'll talk about that. So what I'm going to come and talk today from the perspective of regenerative, holistic, sustainable. Those are oftentimes connected to farming and agriculture, but they also pertain to gardening. So that's the way I'm going to come to you today, okay? So primarily, have you heard of these words? Yes. And give me a little bit.
So like permaculture or
Okay.
even like the German mounts.
Oh, raised beds.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And do you know the basis for this? Goes back to soil health. If we can produce healthy crops from our gardens if we have healthy soil. So those are the things that we talk about. And so this soil health, and there's some particular principles of soil health that if we look at these, we can build and maintain a healthy soil, which in turn produces healthy plants. So and look at some of these. We'll come back to some of them, but look at it and analyze in your mind, what do you do in your landscape and in your garden? Cover the soil. How many of us cover the soil? And this is year-round. Very good. Bentley gets an A. Minimize soil disturbance. My dad was a farmer, okay? So I grew up on a farm. And if you couldn't use a tool or equipment to do something, there was no use doing it. You just don't take the time and effort. So if you can't use a tiller or a plow, it's too much work. But a real big component is minimize the disturbance to the soil. So recreational tillage is not an option with healthy soils. Increase diversity. So instead of a monoculture, which we find on farms most of the time, increase that diversity and put a variety of crops, which we do in a garden anyway. Maintain, and if you're minimizing disturbance, you're covering the soil with either plants or some type of mulch, you're maintaining some of these root systems and living plants. Integrate livestock. I'm not going to do that in my garden, but that's part of the agriculture.
No chickens?
That?
No chickens, huh?
Oh yeah, you can. I love chickens, and I love to have them in the garden. They just eat my little plants to begin with. So first I want, just so you understand some basics, is there a perfect soil? Have you heard, what are some names that you've heard for good soil? Loam.
When I was in Nebraska, they had clay soil and everything grew.
It's clay soils, okay? Okay, good. You have no preconceived notions of soil. I'm assuming. So a lot of times we'll talk about soil texture. I just want to introduce some of these concepts so you understand what we're talking about. When we're talking about clay or texture, texture is just a combination of the mineral parts in the soil. So you may have a soil that's primarily clay, or you may have a sandy soil or a silty soil. Those just refer to the size of the particles. Sand is larger, silt is smaller than sand, and clay is the very smallest particle, just soil particles. When you get kind of an even distribution or an even percentage of each one of those, you get what we call loam. So you can have a clay loam that may fit in here somewhere. You can have a sandy clay loam. You can have a silty loam. You know, it's just a name that then we can look at a soil report and say, okay, that's the texture of my soil. And you know what a soil profile is. You have the parent material, the bedrock, and subsoil, and then topsoil. Organic matter on the top, because organic matter is just plant materials or slow kids, I used to say. They get caught there and start to decompose, you know. So, so you understand what we're talking about. When we talk about particle size, and remember, particle size relates back to soil texture. If you have a clay type soil compared to a sandy soil, the particles are much bigger here than they are here. So water and air flow through sand soil a lot faster than they would a clay type soil. It says this is a tortuous path. So it moves much slower through clay because you're going through so many particles, okay? If you have questions, ask, but texture, what that has to do. So a sandy type soil, your water drains very quickly, going down to, you know, you'd expect it to be clay where it moves the slowest, but actually it's right here between a clay loam and a silt loam, and that's where the soil moves the slowest. You have real great aeration in a sandy soil because there's big pore spaces between each particle, down to clay where we get very little aeration, okay? Drainage, compaction, very little compaction in a sandy soil, a lot of problems with compaction in a clay soil, okay? All right, next term is soil structure. And I'm having to use this because I don't have a cool little pointer. So, you know, I feel this is real old school. But soil structure is just the term that explains how soil, those particles, and everything in the else in the soil come together, how they form. So how it clumps together. And if you have a good soil structure, that can compensate or maybe a not so perfect soil texture. So if you have a sandy soil, you know, that texture, it makes water go through really quick, nutrients don't stay very good. But if you build a good soil structure, that will compensate for that, and it'll have more water holding capacity, more nutrient holding capacity, and the other end with clay soil, okay? So when we talk about soil structure, we're talking about how those soil particles and organic matter clump together. So we have different names for them. So have you seen this type of soil before? Good, bad?
Bad.
Not so great. Yeah, it's kind of bad. You know, this is kind of where we get down to what we might call a granular structure, because the particles actually aren't coming together. They're all separate. Into here, where this would be more of an aggregated soil, where the particles are coming together and they're making smaller, you know, clumps within there. So we have different names for them, but it's basically just how the soil particles are clumped together and aggregated. Okay, next. So in our soil, the mineral part, so the texture part, sand, silt, and clay, that's about 45 to 50% of the soil. Then the other 50% is taken up of water and air. The more water, when you water the soil, of course, there gets to be more water between all those particles. As the soil dries out, there's more air. Now, when you compact the soil, when you're out there driving trucks and tractors across it, this area becomes less and becomes more compacted. In an ideal world, we would have about 5% organic matter in our soil. Now, how much do you suppose you might have? Now, I know Bentley went off the chart. He's probably, you know, 50% organic matter. Just kidding.
I'm working on it. I'm trying.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Anyway, so what would you suppose in our Utah soils? Remember, organic matter is at the top, on the top level. It comes from plants primarily, but, you know, slow-moving, dead animals too. But
3%.
What's that?
3%.
3%. That's high.
Oh.
Yeah. 2%. That's high. in our soils, we have, you know, just if you were to go out here and take in some soil and have it tested, it's usually less than 1%. So you can see that we have some room to add into our soils, and we can do that with our garden soils. Okay, this is soil structure we're talking about. So this would be in a compacted soil. This is what happens to the roots. These are both the same type of plant, corn. So this is how it grows in a compacted soil. So the structure has basically been destroyed. It's just smashed. So you can see what the roots do. Compared to an aggregated soil, where there's room for that air and water to move through the soil, because you've created aggregates, okay? Oh, my computer's here. Okay, here again you can see. So this is to like if you had, this is typical on a farm and also in gardens where we till the same ground over and over again. You get what's called a hard pan, and it gets, the soil becomes really compacted where the end of those tiller tines go, or the plow, and you get it, the water just does not infiltrate through there. There's explanations for that, but that's what happens compared to a soil where you've had some deep either cultivation or you've created that aggregated soil and you don't have a difference. So important stuff. Okay, switch. Now we're going to talk about soil microorganisms. There's about in a thimble, or the size of your little pinky here, there's about 1 billion soil microorganisms in, like a cubic yard of soil. Tons. And what we do to the soil determines on whether we have those microorganisms in the soil or not. And these are the basis for having a healthy soil. So if we can create an environment that they can live in and, they do well in, that's going to improve our soils probably more than anything else we can do, okay? So this is important. So we're basically managing from earthworms. How many like earthworms? Oh, good. Some keep their hands down because they make our lawns bumpy. But that's because we have compacted soil where our lawns are growing. That's why the earthworms come up. But if we manage for those, we're managing for a healthy soil. So they like organic matter. That's their food. That's what microorganisms, all the organisms in the soil are looking for, is organic matter. We want to maintain moist, not wet conditions. Wet means the earthworms come up because they're looking for oxygen. They need oxygen to survive in the soil, as do all of these microorganisms. And so we need to manage for a moist soil, not wet, not dry. Reduce compaction, big time, big important. Reduce tillage again, here we see it again. And reduce pesticide use. When I say the term pesticide, that's an all-inclusive term for insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, arachnicides, everything, every kind of side, pesticide, okay? Now, let's talk about this organic matter and soil amendments. And I wanted to just, is this soil?
I like it.
No, it's not soil. It's an amendment. Now, when we talk soils, we have certain terms that we use with them, and when we get a soil report, we get certain names or things that go along with them. We'll come back to that. When you talk about a soil amendment, there are no rules that apply as far as saying what we have to say is in this bag for a soil amendment. So, I looked on here, it's like peat moss, and there may be some compost and forest materials is what they call it. This is not soil. Although some of them, and I went back, I grabbed this one, it says potting mix, but a lot of them say soil mix or potting soil, not soil. So there's a difference, okay? These are soil amendments. When we talk about other soil amendments, compost is a big one that's talked about. And, we take, I'm sure you've all done compost. Yes, so we know what we're talking about with compost. A lot of different things. It's different organic materials. When I say the word organic, it means that thing had, whatever it is we're talking about, has carbon in it. When you're saying in organic chemistry, it's anything with the element carbon in. And that means it was something that was living, or is living, or was once living. So think about, would nitrogen be organic? No, because it doesn't have carbon. It has to have that carbon molecule, okay? So when we're composting things, we're composting organic material. So leaves, grass, wood. I'm going to say it. There's actually a lady that was at school when I was there that was looking at composting cows. And it works. There are things that were alive. So it's anything that was once alive. You start out with, the big material, the leaves. You can determine what was there. Over time, it decomposes, and that's these little microorganisms were at work. They are not in here. Microorganisms are not in here. They're in soil. So that's a big difference. They come from the soil and they start to work here until you get something that looks like soil. This is compost, composted organic material. Now, does that make sense? So a lot of times we talk about greens and browns to compost. Green material would be like anything that's green, grass. Browns would be things like dead leaves, newspaper, cardboard, wood. The greens materials compost very fast, and they have a lot of nitrogen in them, and that's the food source for microorganisms. So the more green you have in, the more they can work, and they're respiring, they're creating heat, and a lot of times you'll see those compost piles steaming. It's from the respiration process. It takes much longer for them to work on wood. There isn't a lot of nitrogen in wood, so there isn't that food source for them. So it takes a lot longer for the brown materials to break down. They're both good for compost, but if you're doing a compost pile or working with it, you want to make sure that you have plenty of greens with your browns. So as a result, you know, people will say, well, I added sawdust to my soil. It should make it good, but everything turned yellow. Why would that be? What? Do you have an idea?
The microorganisms are stealing nitrogen from the plants to metabolize the brown matter.
That's correct. So you don't want to put, you know, a lot of people say, oh, it's acidic, or there's these weird things, your pine needles are acidic and that's why it's altered. No, they're just brown materials and they take up a lot of nitrogen to decompose. Okay? All right. Any questions? Do you have a compost pile? What do you do to compost? Compost is important for us.
I was actually talking to Krista this week. I love going, I know this sounds horrible, I love going to the dump.
Okay.
Because they already have the compost ready. And my biggest struggle right now is, okay, I can get a couple loads for not very much, but it's going to be hot. It's like hot, the steam you were talking about. How do I get it ready to where I can use it to amend my soil? Because my soil is so compacted right now, so I'm struggling.
Do you know how to work a shovel?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good. I love people that know how to work a shovel. Yeah, you incorporate it with a shovel. And here's my recommendation. I know the compost from the dump, and I think about everyone that I know around here uses animal manure in making compost. The thing with that is manure is high in salts, and we don't want to add a lot of salts to our grounds because that does not create healthy soil. That destroys microorganisms. So we need to be judicious with use. So I only put on about 1 inch top and then incorporate it.
Does it matter whether it's chicken or cow or goat?
Not to me, no, not to the soil.
Okay.
Like chicken manure is a little higher in salts and urea. Horse manure is less. So sometimes you can put more horse manure on than you would want to chicken manure. So there's considerations there, okay? If you had just plant material that you were decomposing and using that as compost, you wouldn't have that issue because it doesn't have the salts in it, okay? So it's a good idea to know what your compost is coming from. Now, I like to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, so I just take whatever, like the apple cores or peelings or whatever I end up with. I bag, you know, put it in a bucket. I go out to my garden and I dig a hole with my shovel and put it in, and it decomposes pretty rapidly.
Something else, sometimes you have older people that pass away, and they've had food storage in their basement for about 50 years. And don't throw that stuff away, because that makes really good compost.
Yeah, don't put that in because they've added salt or sugar or.
Well, I've used beans and rice out of those, and they will compost it with proper greens and browns.
The dry beans and rice.
Yep.
Yeah.
So no salt and sugar added.
Right.
Good.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And my chickens eat the wheat quicker than they compost, so.
Okay. All right. Does that help? Has that answered some questions you may have had, or maybe you didn't know what to ask? Huh?
I have a question.
Sure.
We have some 55-gallon drums of wheat that's now gone moldy. Can we use that in our compost?
You know, okay, there's a couple of things that you could do. You could probably compost it. Another thing is you could use it. Is it moldy, wet, moldy, would it sprout?
No.
Okay, then you could probably put it in your compost because you haven't added anything else to it. And it's organic matter, right?
Yeah.
So it will decompose.
Would you just sum up in 30 seconds? I'm sorry, I just came here. I just got here. Can you sum up in 30 seconds what you've been talking about? Mostly is it the soil?
So no, you're good. So I'm gonna, if I may answer for you, it's all on YouTube, so you can go back and watch the whole thing. Before you leave, come and I'll help you find the channel so that you can watch the part you missed, because she can't sum up in 30 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, you want the clip notes. This is already a clip note version. Okay, let's go to soil preparation. You know about texture, you know you're trying to create an aggregated soil structure, and you know that you need to incorporate organic matter, okay? Soil preparation. So you can see this is a pretty ambitious project, you know, digging up. I can't stress enough how much to reduce that tillage. It makes a big difference. There's some techniques that, you know, I have to think, where did we get this idea that we had to farm in or garden in rows?
My dad.
Your dad.
Because that's where the water flows when you're
Yeah,
irrigating.
that's
doing
Okay,
it.
so when you're irrigated,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was bigger agriculture too, so they could get tractors in.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to.
Because
run
you can
those.
even, do other things other than run it through a row, you know, through the furrow. I mean, there's ways to change that up with just a little bit. But yeah, it goes back to big agriculture where we needed equipment. You know, when the Europeans first started, they had what they called a cottage garden or a kitchen garden. You know, it was basically you had a home with a little plot of ground, and they were usually small plots where more of this more intensive garden started. And it was just, well, I'm planting spinach here and some corn. You know, they usually didn't do corn in a cottage garden, but spinach or tomatoes or something like that. And they were just in the yard. They weren't in a row. They were just in the yard. And so that's where raised beds, the concept came back from these European cottage gardens or kitchen gardens. But yeah, big agriculture is the reason we've got rows. And like I said, my dad, you know, if you couldn't do it in a row, if you couldn't do it with the tractor, didn't want to take the time to do it. So we had a half-acre garden, huge, you know, in furrows that we watered with and everything. But it was take the tiller down the middle of the rows so that you could take care of the weeds. And we grew into that. And in the process, we've destroyed the structure and health of the soil. And so that comes back to home gardens, is we do them in rows because that's how we were taught by our father and our grandfather. That's how they did it back from the times they had a horse to pull the plow. Anyway, you can see this garden isn't in rows, it's in beds, but we prepared the soil. So that's taking, if we can do a soil test and determine what kind of a textures of soil we have and what the organic matter is, then we have a recipe to go and take care. We can add more organic matter. The important thing there is to incorporate it into the soil without so much tillage. And there's the other way of adding organic matter is using what we call cover crops, or green manure crops. So like when your garden, you pick the produce, or you know, you have lettuce here in the beginning of the season, now you cut it all and there's nothing there. You can go in with one of these really quick crops, and that's why I was wondering about your wheat, if it was still could be germinated. You could use that as a green cover, a green manure or cover crop. And my brother, you know, one time he gave me a bucket of oats, and I just, when I was done with that part of the garden, I threw the oats out there. Or peas, you know, even garden peas. Sometimes you get them and they grow and they're too old. You don't want to eat them. Throw them on the ground, they'll germinate. And so this is another way you have a cover crop, but you're also covering the soil as well, too. So you're accomplishing several things incorporated into the soil, and you've added organic matter. Have you ever tried any of these?
So if I plant, I have some old wheat, so if I put that on the soil in the fall, and then in the spring, use my shovel and turn it under.
Perfect. Yeah, the farmers are really doing this more and more, using cover crops between their main crop and putting it in. And one thing that's really beneficial in the farms and agriculture is they'll turn the livestock out onto these cover crops, which go through and graze them down and poop and everything, and they're adding everything there, so they're really reducing the amount of time they have to spend on those fields and stuff. Anyway.
Can I pipe in real quick with the turning the livestock out on there?
Yeah.
My soil science professor, one of the things I remember most is when he pointed out that on a farm where they were allowed to do an experiment and take 1 acre out of the whole thing and intensively manure it, but carefully, that it appeared 100 years later, you would still be able to tell the difference in yield of that added organic matter.
Yes.
100 years later.
Makes a big difference. Big differences. Okay, cool. Thanks for adding that, Bentley. Okay, let's talk soil fertility for a minute. Everybody wants to know soil fertility. What do I need to add to my garden? And I'll tell you, number one, compost, compost, compost. Okay, that makes a big difference. But just so you understand the soil fertility and what happens with it. Like I said, 96% comes from air and water. So then we have these three, basically, what we'd call macronutrients, but still nitrogen is only 1.5%. These are small in percentage. Sometimes sulfur is considered a macronutrient. The rest are all very small quantities. Look at how little you need. But in some instances, you find plants that show an iron deficiency or show a calcium deficiency. I've seen a magnesium deficiency. But it goes back to how the soil, how it's watered, how the plant is maintained. So we'll talk more about that. Types of fertilizer. Of course, there's inorganic fertilizers. Those mean something that was created in a lab and basic elements. And then you have manures, compost, other kind of organic materials. Green manures is considered a fertilizer because you are adding elements back. So tell me, what would be the biggest difference between an inorganic fertilizer, something that came in a bag, and these fertilizers? Yeah.
Your organisms can utilize this without stealing nitrogen from your plants.
Good.
So,
Any other ideas?
I feel like with the ones from the store, from the lab, they become like dependent on that and don't necessarily do as well with the.
That's true.
Another thing, way to look at what this gentleman said here is that the inorganics are quicker because the organisms in the soil are not needed to convert manures and so forth to get that nitrogen out of it and to make it into a useful form. It's already in a form that will dissolve in water. So add water, it goes into the soil. compared to the manures and things, it takes a while for the organisms to convert it to something.
Very good. That's true.
But I'm just thinking, if organic is the thing to do, it's got to do with energy and the energy that's transferred from the plant to the person who eats it.
Yes, that's a good observation. It has to do with, and that's part. This whole cycle has a lot to do with carbon sequestration and eliminating greenhouse gases by using organic or things. And in a way, we're talking energy, I guess. Or are you thinking in it in another vein?
I'm just thinking energy.
Okay.
Strength and utilization of the natural rather than the unnatural, which can't be recreated because they put it in.
No, okay, it's hard to, you get a thought in your mind. So, okay, I'm thinking too, with an inorganic fertilizer like this, you get 3 elements. With these, you get all the macro and micro nutrients that those plants need. Okay? Yeah.
So we're making lazy worms, is what you're saying with inorganic. It doesn't take as much energy for them to like break it down. But on the whole, it's better with the manures and the green manures. It's better all around for not just the worms in the ecosystem, but also for the food that we ingest. Is that what you're saying? Just a question.
Yeah, it's better. It's okay. Go ahead.
I have a book I really like, written by a fellow.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to speak up just a little bit.
I have a book I really like, written by he's a botany professor in the southeast somewhere, and he really hates inorganic fertilizers.
Okay.
Personally, I haven't observed the things he talks about, but he says the inorganic ones make your system out of balance because nothing comes with carbon. So because the organisms are going to need those nutrients with carbon. I haven't observed that with my plants. They grow just fine with inorganic fertilizers, but he's talking at the microorganism level, of the bacteria, the fungi, and so forth, that they need a balance. According to him, he's definitely. I like his books and I like what he writes, and he's taught me lots of things, but I haven't observed that in my garden. But I just want you to put that out there too. People say using the inorganic makes your soil out of balance in some way, and specifically he talks about it in terms of the microorganisms.
That's true. If we're not, and my personal opinion and what I've observed from what I've done, you go to school, you learn a lot of things, and you learn what's supposed to happen, but it doesn't sink in for me until I try it. So what I've observed is just what you've said in my landscapes, is that when I use too much inorganic, you get that flush of growth, you get quick results, but what's happening in the long run is you have to go back more and more to add more to it to get the same results. Where with, and I'll use the term organic, with compost and naturally occurring dead plant materials incorporated back into the soil, I see a longer lasting effect, and it takes a little bit slower, but over time, much better production and much better results than using inorganic. So I do not use inorganic fertilizers anymore. So.
And I use both just for that reason, actually, because I want the soil to get stronger and healthier over the long term, but I'm also want a crop this season that's going to be better.
Okay.
So I use both, actually.
You're building soil health.
Yes.
That's a process, and it doesn't happen overnight. But we're really used to seeing quick results, aren't we? We want
a soil investment.
It is. It's an investment. Thanks. That's great. Okay, I don't want to beat this to death, but maybe a little bit. So I just want you to understand, on a label, you have the three numbers: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Okay, and that's what it's going to tell you exactly what's on the label. So you know, just those three elements. Sometimes they'll include sulfur or iron. Okay. Okay. How do we select a fertilizer? If you're going to use an inorganic, and I'm not saying people shouldn't, I'm not saying that, okay? But how do you know what you need? You know, you want a good crop. How do you know what you need? You do a soil test, or you look at the symptoms that you may be exhibiting on some plants. And then you select that. What kind do you need? Do you need nitrogen alone, or do you need a complete, which is all three elements? Anyway, do you need to add that every year? And what about extras? So soil testing. Has anybody had their soil tested? Yay!
Give them another A.
Yeah, Bentley's an overachiever. But you use it, especially to find out. I like to know every time I get a new property or something, I want to know what I've got. So I'll have a soil test done. It helps you diagnose, and yeah. I put this website on the pages that were back there, so it's easy enough to do a soil test. So here's what you get when you get a soil test. This is one I did at my house now. So it will tell you what texture you have. So I have a clay loam, not a surprise. I knew it was going to be a clay something. What's the pH? Are you familiar with pH? Acid or alkaline? So 7 is neutral, mine's a 7.4. It's slightly alkaline. Not a surprise, because our soils in Utah are lime-based, calcium carbonate. So it's like, yeah, we're going to have alkaline soils, and we have low rainfall, which is another difference between us and the coast. They have acidic soils. So whenever there are soil amendments that are advertised and sold at stores here to put lime on your soils, we have lime soils. We really want to add more to them, but it's in the stores. Oh gosh, I want to say, don't do that. Don't do that to people. Okay, salinity. Mine's a 0.95, 93, which is in the normal range. We like to keep that salinity level lower. But the phosphorus in my soil is very high. The potassium is high. I would not want to add those. I don't want to put a complete fertilizer on my soil because that would bring them up. Now, one of the issues I've seen is that, maybe we'll hit this in a minute. Okay, so you'll get that. This didn't give me organic matter because I just had a very simple test. You can have it tested for all these things and find out what is in your soil if you want to. So it costs money, but the soil lab is right here in Logan. Really cool that we have that facility right here. And then they send you something, they tell you your pH is normal. You know, most things are normal. The phosphorus is excessive, don't put any, and don't add any more potassium. If I were going to add fertilizer, it would be nitrogen only. And this is talking about an inorganic fertilizer. Okay, so let's look really quick. I don't know, how long do you go here?
You're good.
Okay.
You've got another 13 minutes before I start considering asking you to wrap up.
All right. Okay. So nitrogen, and these are the things that you'll notice if you put nitrogen on your, just like you said, really quick. Potassium, you may see some weird, you know, and yellow leaves. There's a lot of reasons for yellow leaves. So these are just some of them. The thing with phosphorus is this one is necessary for fruits and roots, is what I call that. I did pick up a soil mix one time and planted plants, and they came up good and everything in the pots. And then they just started to slow down and popped them out, and the roots were marvelous, but the plant was not doing well. I had a soil test done way over the top on phosphorus. So you need to be, I'm even very cautious about what kind of potting mixes I get anymore, because you can get some that just are, they don't fall within the range of normal. But, okay, here's one I want to talk about, calcium. How many get blossom end rot on your tomatoes? Okay, cool. Do we have calcium in our soils? Yeah, we do. We have an overabundance of calcium in our soils. So why would we see a calcium deficiency in a plant?
It's not always in an available form.
That's part of it, but the biggest thing is it's not available to the plant because we're overwatering usually. It's overwatering or
Irregular watering too. If you water, I've had people water once a week, they'll drown it once a week, and then they'll water the rest of the week, they still get, they theoretically have enough water, you know.
So water is a little bit tricky. We got to think when those plants are little, when we've got little seedlings in there, we water almost every day to make sure that they become established in the soil. Over time, from the time they're a little seedling to be when we have a big mature plant, we've changed that watering schedule. And if we have it on our lawn water automatic, that's not always going to take care of the plant the way it needs to be watered for a garden plant, for a vegetable plant. So just for a tomato, for instance, you put in a little one, you may be watering it every day or every other day to get it started. As time goes on, you water it longer, you keep the water there longer because you want that root to go down into the ground. And the roots go where the water is. So if you've got a little plant, this goes for trees big time. But if you've got a little plant with shallow roots, you're watering and a little bit below. So those roots will follow the water. So you're watering more, but you put more time between it. So when you get to when that tomatoes, plant is bigger, I'm watering maybe every 7 to 10 days, but I'm watering longer so that water goes deep. Okay. Now, if you can get used to a system that works in your soils, and this goes back to soil texture and structure, you've got to experiment a little. If you're getting blossom end rot, then the key is you got to let it dry out a little bit more and put a little bit more time between water. I know that's kind of hard for some of us to do, and sometimes you still get it, but the thing is, if you're building that soil, if you're creating that good environment, it may take a while, but it's going to reflect in the plant's growth and the indications that you see. Let that be a challenge to you. I've had the same experience. Believe me, I've done the same thing. And usually I'll see a little bit of blossom end rot on my first tomatoes. So I know, that's giving me an indication that I'm still watering too much there at the beginning of the plant. So good luck. Okay. It's not an easy fix, and please do not add calcium. Yeah.
I got a question. Do you happen to know off the top of your head what the soil sample, soil test cost? Do you remember?
25 or 35.
25 or 35?
Thanks.
There's 2 different tests.
Okay, good. Thank you. And the more elements that you're testing for, the price may go up.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. How long does it take? I mean, you take it in, and then how long does it take to get your results back?
Seems like it was about a week, 10 days. It wasn't very long. And they will, if you look on there, and I put that website, they'll give you instructions, how to do it, where to take it, everything, okay? All right. Okay, let's go from there. Okay, we don't need to talk about that, but this is what I want to do. Here's our traditional gardens in rows. I want you to think of some alternatives, and we were talking about furrow irrigation. but there's something we call wide rows. And so you're putting more plants than having a walkway, but you could run a furrow down the middle. So that's a concept that would be, the whole concept is you're not walking where you're planting. You incorporate soil amendments into this part of the soil that you're planting plants in, and you designate a place that you walk on that's compacted over time. And so you don't put plants there, you put plants where you're increasing the soil health, okay? So raised bed gardening. You've heard of it? Does anybody garden in beds? Cool, good, so you know a little bit. So when you look at a seed packet, basically here is, let's see, carrots. So you put carrot seeds 1 inch apart in rows that are 10 to 14 inches apart. So basically, I like to do paper towel gardening. So I can fold my paper towel into, if it's 12 inches, it's about 12 inches square, fold it up and you get 1 inch squares here. This said every 1 inch, I can put a carrot in every inch. If I have 12-inch square paper towel, how many carrots can I plant in here?
144.
144. How many carrots can I plant in my row in 1 foot? 12. So I'm looking at space. I'm saving a lot of space by putting, I've got 12 rows of carrots here, which would have taken 144 inches in my garden, or 144 inches in my garden. Does that make sense? This, I love this one. Just personally, I keep mine about 4 feet apart so I can reach from both sides into the middle of the bed. You can do whatever you want. They don't have to be wood. You don't have to have wood around them. You can. They could just be raised. They could be a designated area. This is where I have garden. This is the soil that I'm creating. Here's the place that I walk where I'm not planting. Just some ideas. This was one of my gardens in one place. I wanted a little something different, so put strawberries in the middle and planted crops around it. So this is my yard now, and I'm just showing you this. This is when I first moved in. Oh, such deer, yeah. So this was a retaining wall. It had 5 blocks. I had to look. I didn't even remember I took a picture, but that was what was there. And I wanted more garden space. So I took down the retaining wall and created.
So you walk on the wall? Is that what you do?
Yeah, I can walk there. This is just 2 blocks high. I can come either from the top or just lean it over. So I'm just planted right here. This I've turned into a native plant area, but so I created a place. There was the retaining wall, took it down, created a bed where I can plant the garden. So that's kind of what it looks like. Then there was another area. This was all full of iris, lovely iris. They were pretty, but not one. So changed that up so that I have this area. This is south facing. So now I can go in here in the spring and I can plant some early season crops. I would be harvesting spinach and lettuce right now because of the aspect. So I'm just giving you ideas.
Putting plants in your landscaping, your garden edges, your rock walls,
Why
things
not?
like that. Carrots are beautiful.
Yeah,
Beet
that
tops are
ferny
beautiful.
Yeah, I know. I just want you to think of something besides a traditional thing that we're used to. Here's my beds for. So my son works for a place he can get 2x4s for nothing, bring them home. So I used a lot of 2x4s in creating beds. But this is my strawberry bed. Here's another, but it's just, here's my bed. So I figure I have right now about 200 square feet of garden. For me, that works out really good. I have more than I need. But you got to think, if you were doing in rows, it would take up a whole lot of room to get 200 feet of just plain growing space. Does that make sense? So here's other ideas. Look how fun. Oh, I was going to show you, and between, I put carpet that I tore out.
You can get it free everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. So when instead of having just bare dirt, I just put carpet down. I know,
Can you
I
do
carpet
like
my
clover or something
outdoors.
that you could
My
just
kids
Mhm.
like.
really low growing or whatever?
Yeah.
To keep it so it's not bad.
Here's just some ideas.
And
Look how
that's
fun.
just a-
Wouldn't you love going back into the
I
evergreen
like
garden?
that one.
Yeah. So just ideas. Okay, you have that. Okay, proper diagnosis. This is important. If you have a problem in your garden and you're seeing some damage, 9 times out of 10, it's human caused. The exception to the rule is disease and insects. Okay, except for grasshoppers, it's less.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, herbicide injury, watering issue. Herbicide again. I can't say enough to really be careful with those herbicides that you use. And there's some, and I'm going to talk about this right now. I've had an issue with a neighbor. Ugh, I'm sure that never happens to anybody else. And so I got looking. I knew what he was using, or he finally fessed up to what he was using. How's that? And so I did a little bit of research on it. There's a product now that's come out that people are using much more. If you've heard of Roundup 365 or Ground Clear Kill, you heard those? I hope you don't. What they have is a chemical called imazapyr in there with the glyphosate. Glyphosate, Roundup is, you have common names and chemical names. Glyphosate is what we call Roundup. But this is called imazapyr. It's a soil sterilant. I just can't say enough. Do not use soil sterilants. They have them and they're for sale and people can buy them, but it doesn't mean it's a good thing to do. They're persistent in the soil and they travel in the soil. So he's done something on the side of the fence and it has gone into my yard and killed 2 trees and numerous other plants. But if you can't prove it, if you don't have proof, then you can't do anything about it.
What do you do to
So
help
frustrating,
your soil?
frustrating.
What do you do to help like resurrect that area that's been attacked then?
Say that again.
What do you do to try and resurrect that area that's been impacted by that?
The only thing you can do is dig out the dirt,
You dig it up and
dig it out and move it.
Really?
Yeah, you can't. I mean, it's pretty unrealistic to try and do that.
Can you like concrete the barrier or will it just go?
Oh,
deep
yeah, dig
and-
down. I think I'd have to go about 6 or 8 feet down. Yeah. Concrete's porous anyway too, so you had a question?
I was gonna say, how does it travel? Is it because of the water?
Yeah, water. So, and when I was the extension agent, I so many times called out, something's happened to my plants. What am I doing? Overwater, what's in, well, it was chemicals. Dicamba, 2,4-D is very volatile in the atmosphere if you spray it, and that's so common. Everybody uses 2,4-D, but it does terrible things to plants. Here's 2,4-D damage here. Here's dicamba damage, Roundup damage. You just, these are the soil sterilants. Here's Roundup, but this is a soil sterilant. So a lot of people look at, oh, they think that's iron deficiency. No, it's a soil sterilant. So, man, if I could just tell you anything, it's stay clear. Do not use them. Okay. In fact, you know, in the whole scheme of things, if we kind of let things alone, we have so many more beneficial insects in our environment than we do those that cause problems. And as we create a better environment in the soil health and reduce the use of chemicals that we really don't need, we increase the number of these kind of insects and mites that are so beneficial. Last year, it was the funniest thing. I had a sunflower growing just covered with aphids. And I was, I hate those aphids. I thought, no, I'm going to leave it all alone. Gee, within days, the ladybugs were there. Yeah, just all over. Baby ladybugs. Have you ever seen them? Do you know what they look like?
Little black and orange dragon monsters.
Yeah.
With spikes and
yeah, they look like a Gila monster to
they're
me.
terrifying.
Yeah, okay. I thought I had one here, but I don't.
What's
Okay.
that one up at the top?
Oh,
Looks like that, yeah.
In the middle on the right side, second in.
that
No,
one?
Up at the
above it.
top, yeah. Up
No,
over one,
Over one.
that one.
What is it?
Use that.
What is it? It bites.
It's a predaceous bug.
Yeah.
You know what? I haven't had to know the name of that one for a while.
I've never seen it till last year.
But he got a big bite on his leg. It was in his pants and he
Yeah.
smashed it and it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
big nasty.
Yeah, it was.
This is very little. It's pretty small.
Oh, it looks the same as that, but it was about.
Oh, maybe that was
3/4 of an
something
inch.
else, because this one is actually about 1/4 of an inch,
Oh, okay.
so it's pretty
It
small.
looks just really similar to that.
Okay,
I found, I have one year I planted dill, and I have a ton of ladybugs and praying mantises. I still have them every year. You want to see baby ones from one life like so.
isn't that great?
They like
Yeah.
it.
And what happens is when you spray for insects, when you spray for the grasshoppers, you're killing those bugs, and that's, I know, it's so hard. I have such a hard time.
That's where chickens come in.
Yeah, I don't spray.
There's too many grasshoppers for the chickens.
So I've got scissors. I go out and see if their heads will come off or not.
On that last slide,
I don't know what to say to that.
it was parasitic, whatever,
Relations.
Which one?
parasitoids on the left, upper left. So does that mean we've got parasites in the garden?
They're
Absolutely.
We
good
do.
beneficials.
Yeah.
These are beneficial parasites. There are good ones and there's bad ones, okay, of everything, okay? Yeah, see, so this little wasp, teeny tiny little wasp, parasitized an aphid, lays an egg in the aphid, the larvae develop and eat a hole to come out. So it's killed the aphid.
I used to live in a place, I had 7 apple trees, and never could catch up with all the predators or the bugs in them. And I had cotton moth, and then one year I just let the grass grow because I couldn't keep up with everything. And I planted elderberries. And that year I found in my elderberries all these little bitty wasps, about an inch long at the biggest. But I had 0 codling moths from the time the elderberries and those little wasps appeared.
No kidding.
Yep, somehow I created an environment where they felt welcome and they ate all my codling moths. I never had to deal with that. I never sprayed my trees after that.
Oh, good to know. I have an elderberry that I need to move a little upshoot. I'm gonna put up on my apple tree.
Yep, and then you just let the weeds grow around it, because somewhere they're gonna create a colony of those little wasps. You give them enough habitat in their ground dwelling. So if you disturb it, they won't live there. But if you let the grass and weeds grow in some little spot next to your tree, I believe you'll probably, with those elderberries, you'll create an environment where those particular little wasps.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Thank you. And I was just gonna say, when we create an environment that attracts those, and like you said, who had dill? That was, dill was bringing in, but like native plants. So herbs and then your native plants. So I I killed all the grass around my apple tree. It was already there. I would not have put it there, but it was there. So I killed all the grass and I put in natives like 2 years ago. Last year they were just swarming with pollinators and different kind of things. So I'm loving that.
Are those all like bright sun, those herbs? Are they like full sun or they need a little bit of shade?
Herbs,
Yeah, those ones.
usually full sun, but I think you can put them in any place and see how well they do.
They'll adjust. If they don't like sun, they'll grow in the shade. If they don't like shade, they'll grow in the sun.
Okay.
So try it, yeah. And avoid so many more. It seems to me that we get really we're kind of clean freaks in our homes, and you go out to the garden and you want to clean everything up. I challenge you to leave a few things instead of trying to clean up too much. But okay, I just want to really emphasize, if you find damage, find out what it is first before you start doing something and spraying chemicals or whatever you're doing. Find out what's causing the problems first. And what you see going on will be, it may be an insect, different insects and the things that we can use. Find out if you do. Oh, go ahead.
You had to slide on the life cycle.
Yes.
One of the things I think is really important that I've practiced, it helps a ton, is on my squashes, like a yellow crookneck or a zucchini. Do not let those old leaves sit there. You have to keep that stuff cleaned up, because you'll create an environment where those bugs come in, set up household, and you have zillions of bugs. But if you'll keep those leaves cleaned up, keep the ground cleared from those dead leaves, you're gonna have a lot less of those bugs.
Absolutely. And about squash bugs, they're in this squash bugs.
That's how you squash them.
Yeah, that's true. That's just what you do. You'll find the eggs underneath the leaves, and if you're out there looking, the simplest, easiest thing to do is fold that leaf over and squash them. So, and you're looking at windows of opportunity. When is the best time, if you have a problem, that you treat it? Not, a grasshopper, when it's this big, it's, insecticides are not going to affect it. So, okay. So, proper diagnosis. Do you really need to do it? Is there a high enough damage that I had one professor that used to say, I plant 3 of everything. 1 for me, 1 for the environment, what happens with the weather, and 1 for the bugs. So anyway, and what's the best management practice for that problem? Okay, so we have lots of things here we could talk about, but I think that's good. Do you have, oh, I was gonna see.
I get you back in front of the camera, we'll wrap up, and then we'll bust out into our little awesome chit-chatting. The end. Thank you, Loralie.